Welcome back to Unshakable with April Chapman, where we discuss all things social, cultural, political, and theological from a biblical perspective. You guys, we are live, I think. Are we live? I think we're live. Hopefully, we are live. Welcome so much. Welcome, you guys, to this live stream. You guys, I'm literally in a room with a live audience, and we are live streaming from the Douglas Leadership Institute Conference. You guys, I'm excited. This is going to be an amazing show. This is the first of its kind. We've not done this before. We have an amazing staff and team. Thank you so much to everyone of the Douglas Leadership Institute who's worked so tirelessly to make this happen. We actually have some guests today. I'm not by myself. I am joined with King Randall. Give it up for King Randall, you guys. King Randall actually serves as the founder of the X School for Boys, and I've learned so much about King Randall over the years, and we'll give him an opportunity to tell a little bit about himself. But I have another guest. I have Mr. Jerron Smith. And Jerron served as the senior advisor to President Trump in his first term, and he's doing some amazing things up there in Washington, D.C. So we're really just going to sit down, and we're just going to have a live discussion. We're going to talk about faith, family, and freedom. We're going to ask some sharp questions, and I really don't want to just have a conversation, though, and just ask questions. I really do want this to be more of a moderated dialogue. And the reason why that's important is because it's easy for us to sit back and discuss the problems, right? We can discuss the problems, but I really do want to talk about some solution-oriented things that we can take back to our local communities and implement so that we can enact change for the better. So we're going to have some fun. And the first thing I want to do, King, you have been such an amazing influence in the lives of so many individuals. And I remember the first time I learned about you, we were in D.C. at the Back to Blue event with Blexic, and I saw this young man with like a crew. I really thought it was a gang at first, you guys. I thought it was a gang because it was all these young black men, and it just goes to show you the stereotypes and the biases that we all carry, even about ourselves, because I'm trying to figure out what is a gang, because they were all dressed alike. I was like, why are they here? Who sent them? What is going on? And the more I observed, and I watched the way you moved with these young men and the way that they were so respectful, and they were just different. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the work that you're doing with the X School for Boys. But before we do that, first, I want you to introduce yourself to the live audience and to those that are watching. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the school and the work that you're doing down here in Albany, Georgia.
My name is King Randall. I'm the founder of the X for Boys program in Albany, Georgia. I'm also the founder of the We Are the Traffic Run Walk Club down in South Georgia. It's been kind of making waves in what we're doing in Albany. Basically, this is a program that I started when I was 19 years old. Just was about 7 years ago, 7 years ago now. And I started this program out of my house, teaching kids how to work on cars, work on houses, painting, how to grow food, changing oil, changing tires, whatever. We were teaching these things, and mainly because I was seeing that a lot of children weren't learning these things that I learned how to do growing up. I grew up in a full family, and I learned how to paint cars. I learned how to weld. I learned how to do all these things growing up. And so I wanted to see other young men do this. And on top of that, once I started taking the children into my home, I started realizing that a lot of children could not read. That was a big issue for me. I saw them being passed through school, and I was trying to understand why these children could not read, to the point where we had children who could not read cat dog. And that was a huge issue for me, and I decided to start a book club and many other initiatives that I'll kind of dig into as she asks questions. I don't want to be long-winded in an introduction, but that's just kind of a brief idea of who I am and what I do. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And Jerron, he worked with President Trump in his first administration. And I learned some interesting things about you, Jerron, because President Trump, as you guys know, did more for the Black American community probably than any other president in my lifetime. We can clap about that, right? But what was so amazing is that what we don't know and realize is that there were some key players behind the scenes that were making that was making that happen, and Mr. Smith happens to be one of those individuals. So, Jerron, if you could introduce yourself to the audience and just give us a little bit of insight as to what you did in the first administration and some of the policy initiatives that you were heavily involved in that so many of us had an opportunity to benefit from.
So, well, thank you for having me on your show, April, and pleasure to be at the DLA Summit and be with all of this beautiful people that's in the room. So, Jerron Smith, I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. Grew up with a single parent father. My mother was always around, but I was also a product of kind of the drug pandemic of the 80s, which led to my parents being separated. But I give God all the glory because, throughout all of that, I got a special mission on my life and was able to kind of shape policy based off of my worldview. I never thought that I would grow up to be a black Republican, especially living in Cleveland, Ohio, blue collar family. But I went to Howard University and became a black Republican. And in doing so, I spent 10 years working on Capitol Hill versus House and Senate. And all of that experience helped me anchor in a number of different policy areas in the White House. And so I was able to kind of, design a strategy that takes a holistic approach towards revitalizing underserved communities. I wrote a book called Underserved, and it talks about, the history of, missed opportunities by politicians to kind of do stuff. And it culminated with President Trump actually doing policy that moved the needle, real social impact, not virtue signaling. And what we saw in the wake of that is, the DEI kind of growth, which you had the left trying to out Trump by saying like, oh, we've done this better. But initially, work on HBCUs, the work that we did around the First Step Back, which freed over 50,000 people from federal prisons and lowered recidivism rates. Also was able to enact opportunity zones, which put about $100 billion of capital into underserved communities all around the country, in over 3,000 different designated census tracts. And then we were able to kind of carve out funding through PPP to help people navigate the pandemic. But I was able to kind of work on a number of different areas, which we probably can get into a little bit here. But I give God all the glory for that. I never thought that I would even be put in a position to kind of advise a president. But more importantly, we had a president that actually listened to some of that advice and put it into action.
Right. Well, I think it's amazing. I think what's so interesting about this discussion, the fact that I have, so Jerron is probably, we're closer in age. I call myself, well, he's a geriatric millennial, and I'm an immature Gen Xer, right? And then we have King here. Are you a Zennial? What is that? So that's not Gen Alpha, is it? Is that a? I don't know.
Yeah, it is.
He's
It's
a
Gen Z.
Zennial. Okay, that's just Gen
Yeah.
Zer. Okay, great.
That means he was born in 1999.
Oh, wow. I was out of high school. I was working. Ooh, okay. All right, that's fine. Well, but what's so interesting, one thing that I'm noticing in observing both of them, these are two handsome black men that are accomplished, and they're doing so many things, but they're doing things that have a measurable impact in black communities, one locally. King, you and I were talking about how you were saying, my social media now, I'm really trying to focus on it being more local because I believe that's where I have the most impact. And then you, Jerron, your focus is probably a little bit more national. At least the initiatives that you were involved in had more of a national impact. But since we're at the Faith, Family, and Freedom conference, I kind of want to talk a little bit about faith. As you guys know, I am a Christian, so this is Unshakable with April, and I ground my entire worldview in a biblical perspective. And one thing, when I was talking to you, King, we talked about, I said, where does this resolve come from you, where you were able to just wake up one day and say, I'm going to take young black boys under my wing and teach them the things that were taught and instilled in me. was there any sort of, I don't know, push from faith, or any, was it some sort of internal supernatural call? What prompted you to want to do that outside of saying, I see these young men, they can't read, and I just want to do something about it?
I grew up in the church. I've been playing drums my whole life. I stopped playing drums when I was about 19 when I went to the Marine
His
Corps.
whole life.
Yeah, my whole life.
Boy, you ain't even live yet.
I started playing the drums. I was about 2 or 3 years old, and I played at churches my whole life. So I lived in the church. My grandmother was a minister. My mom, my granddad, whole nine. Everybody was preaching. I was behind the drum set to the point where in my adult life, it's actually tough for me to go to church because I'm not behind the drum set, and it's tough because as a musician, people don't realize all the things that we are trying to do to man the service, to keep the spirit there, to keep just the whole atmosphere of the service right. And so we're talking to each other, we're giving signals, etc., to make sure that everyone is being able to worship in a comfortable way. But we also have to worship in our way, and it's tough for me. But aside from that, growing up, I've always watched my mom, my grandma, my granddad, etc. They always were doing something, and something that they always felt was important. And I don't feel like I can't do anything. And so when I was younger, I remember that I told this lady, I was like 17. I told this lady I wanted to write a book, and she was like, "Why you trying to write a book? You ain't lived no life yet. How you gonna write a book at 17 years old?"
Right.
And so, and this was a lady that I truly respected. I loved her to death. She was one of the ministers at the church. Loved her to death. She always loved me too, but that was just one conversation that kind of turned me around with her, and it kind of stifled me a bit because I was like, well, maybe she might be right. But then also a big part of my big head, I'm like, yeah, bro, whatever. I'm gonna go make some stuff happen anyway. That's book worthy. And so that's what I started doing. It, I just feel like this is normal for me. This is normal life. So it's hard for me to give an answer that's like, well, I had this, purposeful, thing, or I read a scripture, or God gave
Or
it to
some
me.
ha
This,
moment.
this
or,
me. Like,
Right.
I don't understand why people don't live in the manner that I do. Sometimes I don't understand why you don't get up and think you can't take over the world, or go
Right.
do whatever you want to do. So sometimes, even in my hometown, when I got a lot of initiatives going in my hometown, I'm just a private citizen. I'm not an elected official. We're building an app for my hometown. We have a walk run club. I have the youth program. I have an initiative going with the police department. I'm just a regular person. I'm not elected official, but people would think that I am. But I'm like, no, you guys can do this same stuff. I'm not walking around here with $1 million either. Like, we living in the same poor town. We grew up in the same poor town. You have to want to make this stuff happen. So I think people, and I've said before, and this is kind of what I told Roland, we have been duped into believing that the only change we could see is through a vote or through a party. Please understand that both sides playing games. Both sides playing games. Both sides can do stuff to benefit. Both sides can do stuff to tear you down. I don't like this whole idea where we running around here like if Joe Biden breathed, he just breathing the wrong way and it's gonna hurt the country. We not finna just do that. It's just stupidity, in my opinion. It's the same thing the Democrats do. If Trump breathe, he's breathing and hurting everybody, and he's racist. Like, I don't agree with that whole. I'm not with that.
Right.
I'm not with that. We play these games in our own minds too, and we have our own little biases. Like, for example, my grandmother put something in our family group chat the other day about Trump and the whole shutdown thing, and I'm like, Grandma, I could find the same video from the Republican side that explain why the Democrats are the reason the shutdown's happening. And the Democrats got all these videos explaining why Trump's the reason the shutdown's happening. And all of them sound like they're giving factual information. I'm like, let's miss me with all that. We got stuff we could do in our own. Well, we got family members that may need food stamps. Okay, well, let's go feed our own families. We'll let them figure that out. And to be frank with you, I'm the whole shutdowns and this and that or whatever like that. I don't feel like at any point that we as regular citizens are not being played by both sides. These people are sitting in there. These people go to each other's churches with each other. They go hang out with each other. They go to dinner together, and they got us fussing and fighting with each other while they hanging out. They got us making videos by them, and they in the same room. They sharing the videos, laughing at us, picking at each other, and can't get together. We have no unity because, oh, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? We got a community that needs to be saved, and that's where I live in Albany. So I live in Albany, and I teach my community the same thing. I don't care what side you on. I don't care who you voted for, whatever. These kids still don't know how to read. Trump got in. Biden was there. Kids still can't read. We got that trash bin over there. The last 8 presidents, you ain't picked it up. Like, miss me with all that. Miss me with the BS about who's in office and what's. I don't know. What can we do for our own community? We cannot be duped into believing that the only thing we can do is vote. You have to get up and fix your own community. Period. Point blank.
Okay. So the reason why this is so inspiring is because, you guys, I just did a show where I went scorched earth because it pains me to hear whether it's somebody's Mima telling you can't do it, or it's some whiny crying jellyback soy boy grown man on the internet telling you can't do it until someone else does something. There's this concept of freedom that you don't ask for permission for the freedom to exist or to be or to do anything. You assert. And we just listened to this young man assert himself and say, this is what I want to do, so I'm going to do that. And that's what I call functioning in your freedom. I like that. Thank you so much, King, for that. I think that was an important point for him to make, because while we might identify with our political, sides of the aisle, and we have an affinity or persuasion that we lean toward, most of the problems that need to be fixed and addressed need to happen at the individual level. And you can do something. We all need to be doing our part. And the first order of business needs to be the family. So I want to talk a little bit about the family. I was telling King before we went live that I have 2 boys that, they want to get married and they want, a family. And I'm not going to lie, I am not motivated to, not that it would be me and my husband's responsibility to give our sons away, but there's a concern in the pool of young women that my boys are going to choose from, because these women, in my opinion, don't want the same things as my sons want. So I want to transition the conversation a little bit, and I want to talk about the family, and I want to talk a little bit about the moral decline that we are currently seeing in our culture. And what would you say, Jerron, are some of the ways that we can kind of change the trajectory of that? Obviously, this being a more faith-based conference, we want to root and ground any sort of policy change. We want to root it in a biblical ethos or a biblical ethic. But from your perspective, how would you either diagnose or analyze the problem, and what kind of solutions would you present to kind of get particularly the Black community back on the trajectory to wholeness again?
So I think this is a very complicated issue, and if we're being honest, it's not really an issue that government can solve for.
Right.
So to what King point is, everything is, all politics is local. And so it starts there. And, both politicians have kind of did this blame game for, and continue to do it on, like, who's the problem. And they politicize a lot of these things instead of kind of offering real solutions or real leadership that kind of puts politics aside and allows for us to kind of get together in this moment. Because, America has always had issues, and it's been up to us to make it a more perfect union. And you do that by community. And in this new age of the internet and social media, it's been harder to imagine what community looks like, because post-pandemic, it really kind of shined a bright light on, like, where civil society is going. And, coming from, so I grew up a little bit of the opposite of you. I didn't grow up in church at all. And in fact, I ended up, getting involved in church because I went to Catholic school. Because my father, the one thing he wanted to make sure I got was a good education, and the Cleveland public schools were really bad. And but in my religion classes, that's how I got close to Jesus Christ. And then when I went to college, it wasn't until after college until I joined my first church, and then I actually went to seminary and got a master's in divinity. But I think that we have to be a lot more, because I learned a lot about the black church. That's probably why I wanted to go to Howard Divinity School, because I've always felt on the outside looking in that I wasn't welcome in the church. Like I always felt that most black churches I had even went to, they looked at me as like worldly, and a person that didn't really belong, and it felt more like a social club that I never belonged to. And my father felt the same way, which is why he kind of was against churches, because he said like people there are mean, they're not nice. So like, but he believes in God, So it's like interesting paradox in life. And so I say all that to say is that I think that there's real nuances. Church is not about just social club. I look at it as the kingdom of God is at hand, and so it's right here in the world. It's creating it right here in the world and meeting people where they're at. And part of that is also using some of the tools that we know. And some of these communities are suffering from years of trauma. We're looking at generations that have grown up without both parents in the household, or maybe one parent who may be working, or a parent that may have been abused, or they may have been abused, and then that abuse kind of carries on. And so we need to have a little more nuanced solutions, and use some of the tools around behavioral health and what we know with people, and try to meet this moment where it's at with healing. And so it's not an easy thing to just say, in many cases we do this, go get married, have a family, but we are not teaching people how to be married, stay married, and navigate that, because marriage is a very hard calling. We're also not teaching when having children, things like postpartum, and how to like be a father when your wife's dealing with issues hormonally. Like all the very nuanced things that makes it harder to kind of keep a family in this social media world. Right. Now, again, the faith element undergirds it all, because that helps you be resilient. That faith piece is a muscle that, like, beyond what your circumstances that you're in, there's hope, because there's a God that's bigger than you, and it can help you kind of deal with your own inadequacies and imperfectness. But I think that like our ministries just have to be a lot different than what they've done in the past, and is meeting some of these communities where they are. And that's what this movement is about. This is my like third DLI conference, and I was very close with Dean Nelson. Real big heart for the community, but I think that's what more people need to see is the heart of the church. Right. That's what really draws people in, love. And we have to remember, Christ came for a reason, because we had a church that existed in the Jewish community that was very judgy, and we had Christ come and talk about the Good Samaritan, and looking at the Gentile, and doing things differently. And so I would just say that. But, I mean, government doesn't necessarily have a big role with that. It's, to King's point, is going to take us, and it has to be community by community.
Okay. So it's interesting. I know he is itching to respond. I know you are. I'm going to let you get it in. It's interesting that you brought that up. I saw that you went to Howard for divinity school. And here's what I'm noticing, though, and I'm not sure if the audience would agree. We are seeing widespread apostasy. And when I say widespread apostasy, a lot of it, if we're going to be honest, we're sending our young men to be trained for ministry, but we're sending them to these institutions that are overwhelmingly cranking out apostates. Like, they're apostates with MDibs and THMs and PhDs. And so the infiltration runs so deep, and it is so problematic, because, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we can say that the church is the solution, right? But then you've got to push a little further, be like, well, what kind of church? I mean, we're in Atlanta. This is the bastion of melanated Marxism. We have a U.S. senator who attends a church, and he calls himself a pro-choice pastor, right? So you've got this worldview that is infiltrating the ethnic expression of the black church, causing us to adopt unbiblical, just completely untenable, unbiblical worldviews. And I'm just to the point where I'm like, no, we got to clean house and start over. What do you say? What do you say?
I call them those schools. What do they call them? Theological cemeteries.
Yeah, the
because
people told me that. He was like, "Oh, so you went to the cemetery?"
You went to the
that's what it is. What's happening is the reason they are so successful at what they do, regardless of whether we agree with it or not, is our communities, especially like my more conservative following, etc. They don't extend grace to people and what has happened to them in their lives. I work with a lot of kids and a lot of moms, and these people are going through it. And so people, when they just give their little talking points off top, oh, you just need to get the father back in the home. The father's like 17. And what exactly is he supposed to be trying to teach this kid? As a matter of fact, he's probably gonna teach his son how to sell drugs too. He probably don't even need to be around his daddy. He needs male figures around him, and not just the dad. We have missed the whole village concept. I don't believe in just I'm gonna teach my son everything I know and that's it. No, my son has a boxing coach. He goes there for 2 hours a day by himself. He also goes to his baseball coach 2 hours a day by himself. He also has a granddad who preaches. He goes there by himself, which I try to make sure that he has men around him. But when we don't extend grace, we have to realize it's the same people that will say, or like on the conservative side, they'll say, well, the crime bill and this and that or whatever, it messed up the black family and the welfare system messed up the black family. It did. Yes, it did. For like 60 years, a long time. So imagine the damage that has been done, and for you to come and just say, put the father back in the home, and that's going to fix all that 60 years of issue? No, that's not how that works. There's a big, like you said, nuance. There's a lot that has to happen in regard to fixing the family and the community. It's not just, oh, we just gonna tell everybody to get married and have kids and that's it. That's just easy to say.
So let's talk about that a little bit,
Go ahead.
because I am of the opinion that we need to be teaching our young girls to marry before you carry.
I agree.
But it sounds like what you are saying is that we're here now. We're already here. The damage is already done. We can work on the next generation to tell them not to go and do likewise. But what do we do with
do
the
with people
broken
now?
pieces
Yeah, it's people
that
broken.
are here? Okay, so are you of the same opinion as well?
I'm of the exact same opinion. That's
Of
what
the
I was,
nuance.
what I
So
was trying to
y'all can maybe y'all
articulate.
can educate me, because I am a hardliner that I'd be like, just throw the whole culture out and start over.
these-
Right?
well, I mean-
These people are alive.
there needs but I understand, because there is redemption and hope and life through Christ. We do have to lead with a more gospel-centric worldview that says Christ came to save the lost. These people are lost. What does that look like? Because I have an answer. I mean, I had the same problem as the baby mama. It was my sin. You know, it's the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, the pride of life. That's what caused me to make the bad decisions that I made. But God was gracious to me in that he gave me a hope and a future and life through Christ, so that the implications of my bad choices didn't work themselves out in the fullness of time to where I don't have 3 kids out of wedlock. But what do we do with the ones that do? How do we help them?
Meet them
Practically?
meet them where they're at. That's
Okay.
the whole thing. You can't make assumptions about people. You just have to meet them where they're at and engage them as a human being first.
Okay.
You know, because I have a methodology. Because I mean, honestly, in the work that I do, you know, yes, I'm a black conservative, but I'm just Jerron and a human being
Hey,
first.
I'm just April,
You know,
right? Yeah.
and like I've been a Democrat, I've been a traditional Republican, I've been a Tea Party conservative, I've been a Trump Republican, but I look at myself as just a pragmatist now. And so in all of my work, you know, through being empowered by God, because I just kind of walk with my honesty and my authenticity and meet people where they're at. That's the gift that I have. I can be authentic in any situation. You know, if I'm talking to a group of white people, I'm gonna sound black. If I'm talking to a group of black people, I'm gonna sound black. You know, so it's just like, and I'm
black.
Jerron, and I'm Jerron Smith. So you're gonna see the name and how
Right.
you're gonna know that background. But I'm gonna kind of still meet you where you're at to kind of learn more. I'm always looking for what's that thread that we have in common as human beings, you know, and the methodology that I talked about in my book first leads with being intentional. And my intention is always to build bridges, you know, regardless of disagreement. I always try to figure out where that bridge is at. That's the Christ-like nature of me. Like, what's that bridge? And then once I have that going, the second thing is building trust. And you don't build trust until you kind of can get that honest dialogue going between people, and we can tear down barriers. Once you kind of get to that trust part, then you can get to a place where there's partnership. and that partnership can lead to some outcomes. And then we can figure out what outcomes worked and which ones didn't work, and then go back to the beginning.
Okay.
But it's not an easy path because like people are dealing with a number of different issues. If you're looking at underserved communities, or even in our community, it's not even about being underserved because a lot of us make it out and then have broken families, and then the kids make it right back to where their parents made it out of because there's no real foundation.
Right.
And we haven't created what I call the Black Harlems around the country. You go to parts of the town. There's an Italian part of town, and that's where they invest all their money. There's a Jewish part of town where they invest in
I mean, there's a
Chinatown.
black part of town, but it's the hood.
That's
Like
my
you
point.
don't want to
That's
be
my-
over there on
But that's
purpose.
But it's not ownership.
You know.
We don't necessarily. It may be a black part of town, but do we own this? Do we own the stores in that town? Have we done all
No,
the
we don't.
development there?
No.
Are we creating all the jobs and stuff that are there?
No.
This is the American way. Building your own community that you would want to have. And so we have to be those people, as King just said. But it takes village by village.
Right.
And a church has always been an anchor for our community to kind of build that out. What I'm saying is, we have to go beyond just having people come to church on Sunday, but
Right.
kind of meeting people in that community, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, as they try to navigate these perplexing times that we're in, where you don't have enough money to kind of pay your rent because rent's too high. You don't have enough money to kind of pay for child care. You don't have enough money to pay for your utilities. Grocery bills are high. And so all you can do is like sit back and roll one up, what I'm saying, to kind of navigate, dealing with this. I'm just going to
Right.
manufacture being high so I can survive this.
Right.
That's where people are at, and it may be alcohol or it might be sex, And so you have to meet people in that moment, and help walk with them. And we haven't done that enough as a community.
I think we the opportunity piece is basically again what he's saying, that we have to create our school system in my hometown. And yeah, I'm going to praise the school system for a moment. Our school system has this program called Level Up. What they do is kids who attend the school, the school system or whatever. They have parents that who may lack jobs or lack opportunity. Our superintendent got a grant to have these parents learn heavy machinery, nursing program, etc. Not only do they do that and teach them those classes, they also offer free childcare while they're getting those certifications and things. So.
Right.
When I went to one of the graduations, they graduate like 25 CNAs or whatever. These are all parents of kids in the school system. I heard one of the dads talk about, I don't have 3 jobs no more. I just got 1 job. Now I'm able to parent my son. Those opportunities are what matters, because it's not just, again, go get a job or whatever like that. There are opportunities that can be created if we put in the right people in the right positions, or if we're lobbying for the right things that we should, because that program is beautiful. And I was like, well, why does the school system have to do this? Why isn't our city government doing that? Because if you're getting people that can work, we can attract more industry here to get people to have better
Skills will be
jobs
there.
where they can parent their kids. Because we got a mama working 3 jobs. She can't parent her kid. The oldest child is probably parenting that baby. And then with the oldest boy who's parenting the kids, he just ran the John on the side of the road, who got the new shoes and the cool
not
cars
John.
or whatever like that. And now he's taught him what to do. And now he's teaching all the other kids all the bad things. And mama don't know what's going on. She just working her 3 jobs to come home and going to sleep or whatever. And just trying to make ends meet versus having a decent, good paying job, trying to figure it out. A lot of it has to do with lack of opportunity, and people need that opportunity. Or even, for example, Birmingham, Alabama, Mayor Randall Woodfin. He's doing a fantastic job with what he's doing as far as trying to help with the programming for people. They put millions of dollars into literally just teaching people how to exist. Because if you have not been outside working with these people in the projects, etc., you don't realize that some people think their whole life is going outside and sitting on the porch every day.
Yeah, pretty much.
And not
Say
just,
what now?
there are people who just go outside and sit on the porch every day.
Well, I know that.
Yeah,
but you're
but-
saying that there's a program that teaches you how to not do that.
Absolutely. Because
quit lying.
listen,
I
go
don't believe
go,
that.
go look up Mayor Randall Woodfin. Everybody ain't his biggest fan, but and not just his city, but other cities as well. They're like, okay, look, we got people who don't know how to read. They have not been taught anything their whole lives. Let's start programming to teach them how to go have a job interview, how to speak to people, simple etiquette. They've been doing that, and slowly things have been changing. The stuff that we want to see is
Right.
not going to be nothing overnight. It's going to take 7 to 10 years to really dig into what it is that we're trying to do. So it's going to take people who have enormous amounts of patience.
Right.
Because, like, for example, I started the program in 2019. I'm just now getting kids, going to the military or whatever like that. It takes time. It takes a minute. So when I'm saying these people don't know how to do a job interview, or these kids can't read, they're not going to learn overnight. They're not going to learn how to exist, without just in their own little bubbles. I told somebody last week, I put in a news article that we only deal with 1% of your town, not even a full percent. So our little bubble that's on social media or whatever, there are completely different subgroups of people that exist out there, and that you don't know who they are. They do different stuff. They watch anime. They think skateboards are cool. There is a group of people who think that you shouldn't use strollers for your kids, and this is all different types of people.
Right.
We don't interact with them. So imagine the people who are extremely poor, and I'm working with them, and I've had a complete change of mindset, because I'm just like, man, okay, these people really don't know. They don't know what they don't know. So I can't just say, go get a job and go. No, they've never seen that. There's people who've never seen anybody in their family have a real job. They've never seen anybody in their family reading. They've never seen anybody in their family have a successful life. I've seen that. We may have seen it on TV or something. These people have never seen that in their life, to the point where they almost think it's wrong. That's why they'll pick on people for even just knowing something. They're like, oh, that's stupid. Why do you know how to read? They've never seen it.
So here's the problem with this. I'm listening to you articulate this, and I'm sitting here. The only thing, you guys, I can think about is the fact that, how are we this many years removed from slavery? And this is where we are. Y'all, we went backwards. Right. And I mean, and we can play the blame game and blame it was this person and who shot John and who did this and who did that. But this is problematic, because why are we living in 2025 and there are individuals who you are saying, like, y'all have watched my show. I'm just like, you have to have a healthy doctrine of work, right? You get a job. I mean, these are basic fundamental truths that they're just self-evident. But you're saying not to everybody. My question is, first, in order for us to understand how to move forward, we need to do an autopsy and figure out, this train went off the rails somewhere.
Go outside.
Go outside.
Yes, go outside. I'm telling you.
And engage with the world.
You have to go to these communities and see what I'm talking about. What I'm telling you is outside in your city. I promise. Go to those sides and just talk to them and look at where their minds are. You're going to be like, you exist? Yes. People really don't know things. And so it's up to us to teach them. So it's not nothing I can vote in office. That's something you have to do.
There's little kids that believe that there was a world, literally there was a world that was black and white.
Yeah, literally. Yep.
What?
From watching black and white TV.
They thought it was no color.
I'm dead serious. Like, teachers and stuff have told me this. This is where I'm talking about, is that, like, you gotta understand,
the world was like lacking color.
Right.
It's kids that have never traveled before. I had kids in my hometown.
No saturation.
We took them to
based off
we
of
took them
black
here.
and white TV and old movies.
They never seen stuff.
They thought the world might have been black.
Never
and
saw
white.
the ocean was big. Never saw a skyscraper before.
Y'all, this gonna be an uphill battle. It's gonna take a while.
It
no,
is.
but I think it's all kind of doable. Because like the work that I got involved. So when I finally got into church, and I joined a very liberal church, but God kind of works in mysterious ways, and like, the one thing I loved about that church is that we had very active ministries, and one of them was the job partnership program that we had. And what we did was we gave faith-based principles to people who were unemployed and severely who were underemployed.
Right.
And I ended up working with a lot of people coming home from prison, and being a mentor to those individuals. As they were kind of dealing with the perplexities of, like, if I've been in prison for 30 years and I come out, and it's just like different. And I remember one person that I dealt with. He was in he was attempted murder. He he found his ex-girlfriend, his girlfriend cheating, and he hit her in the head with a jackhammer. And spent 30 years in prison. Changed his life around. And I had to spend a lot of intimate time with him. But he got on a really good track. But it's not just about the job. It's like, what's your gift? Frederick Douglass, when he was, escaped from slavery, before starting his newspaper, he had a manufacturing job, and he did that manufacturing job to pay for a newspaper, And then that's when he started doing this abolitionist work. But the goal was for him to do the abolitionist work, and he used the job as a tool to kind of get there. And that's what it is almost for everyone. Like everyone has kind of a life path, and it's kind of that's why you're meeting people where they are. Where is God trying to take you?
Right.
Let me see if I can use my discernment to help meet you where you are and help have God talk through me. And that's what I'm talking about with like moving out in the world, because there's a lot of like small organizations that are doing the work on the ground.
Right.
In many cases, especially working in the federal government, I've tried to open up pockets of funding to those organizations that are actually focused on outcomes, not the organizations that you historically hear about like NAACP or Urban League, but the organizations that's actually changing hearts and minds, but don't really have the ability to write a grant, or even to spend time because they're too busy doing the work. But it exists all around the country, and like these are things that like the church could be a hub for. Kind of locally getting those organizations together that are actually creating ecosystems of opportunity that don't exist.
So it sounds like this is a multi-pronged approach, and here's my pushback, because I always want to be careful that we don't take the church outside of its primary mission, which is gospel-centric and Christ-focused. People do need to be aware of the fact that sin is our problem. Like, we can throw money at it, and we can have, I know, like you said, you when you first started going back to church, it was a very liberal church. One thing I will say, the liberal churches are very good at the do-gooderisms, meaning they know how to put programs in place to be a socialistic arm, or to be an extension of a socialistic arm of the government. They do that very well. But then they actually neglect the actual spiritual problem, and they are not making disciples, and they're not teaching people how to train and raise their children in fear and admonition of the Lord, because they have overshadowed the mission of the church and made it more of a social effort as opposed to a spiritual effort. So I'm always careful. I like that idea, but we're going to end up, in a pragmatic way, we're going to end up overcorrecting and moving away from the primary goal of the church. And it's because we were taught that the church's goal was to be some sort of socialistic, evangelistic arm of something, but that's not what we were. We were never meant to be that. At least theologically.
When you think about the gospel, though, the gospel is all dealing with all of these different broken people who became disciples. And it wasn't just based off of their sin. They got forgiveness of sin. And so to my whole thing is like, we need to yield to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is what's guiding this real battle. And like some of this stuff is big, but it's doable with meeting some of these people where they are. When you look at Mary Magdalene or even Peter, who denied Christ and he had to come back and end up becoming the rock.
Oh, absolutely.
So the gospel is a story of like dealing with broken people and trying to figure out how we do healing, through the Holy Spirit. And it is complicated. I don't have all the answers. In fact, in most cases, I lead it to God, and I just try to like discern the best I can. But we are against big things. I mean, like the influencer network is like crazy. So, you got like the Marxist ideology that comes out of the Democratic Party and our Democratic leadership, but you also have this culture of influencers that's coming out of hip hop, and athletes and like celebrities and everything like that. And so it's a lot of idolatry in worship of that, or idolatry in worship of government. And still, even with all that being said, I meet people where they are and try to lean in out of love, and I let God kind of deal with these bigger issues that we can't see, and try to lean on my.
We are in such a crisis, though. The people who are at church, the people who need to be at church ain't there. And to be frank with you, I've said before, and people get mad at me, when Jesus come back, he ain't coming to be nice to nobody. He's gonna go straight to the neighborhoods where the churches are located and get on the churches as to why the community looks this way. I've said before, I don't think at this point we are in such a crisis. Why is church at church on Sunday? We need to be outside. Absolutely. We need to be out the door, because I grew up in crazy church. My grandmama them had church on the side of the road in the neighborhood where people needed to hear it at, where nobody was inside the church doing nothing. Y'all doing the same thing every Sunday, and ain't nobody outside doing nothing. On top of that, even just speaking to our health issues in our community, I'm sorry, but the black church is big. We are huge.
We
We
are
are
big. We're the
huge.
big
And
bag,
and,
ain't we?
and I'm gonna say it like that because it makes me upset because
Let him cook.
the
'Cause
church,
the calories are high.
listen, the church, we don't have gym ministry. There is no gym at the church. We got all these facilities. There ain't no gym there. But it's important because that
treadmill
also
inside.
has something to do with our mental health. Because if we are not taking care of our bodies, we are not mentally sane to even make nothing happen. And so I went and pulled the health data. The reason I started my run club in Albany, I went and pulled the health data for our hometown because my coroner was like, "Hey man, it's people dying every day in Albany, from preventable health issues." And when he said every day, I'm thinking he just giving me a little, we're a little small town, just like, okay, yeah, they probably dying, but he just exaggerating a bit. So I went and pulled the health data. And when I say preventable health issues, it's literally preventable stuff that we can just stop on our own, not like stuff you can't get rid of. I go and pull the health data. We only have about 69,000 people in our town, very small. We losing 1,000 people a year to preventable health issues. 1,000. In the last 5 years, we've lost 5,500 people in my hometown to preventable health issues. So the conversation 5 years ago was like, man, the population is declining in Albany. People are leaving. We need to figure out. No.
They
No.
dying.
People are dying in our hometown. And so everybody likes to run around and talk about the couple of shootings we have a year. It ain't even a lot, but they just will sell it to you like, Albany is the worst. Oh, my God, these shootings. I'm like, listen. I understand these things are bad, but we have 69,000 people here. 12 people getting killed is not some crazy issue. Our biggest issue here is something that we have to take accountability for. Because all of us can run around here talk about crime all day, because we can do that for the crime. Aha! But when it's time to talk about our health issues, we have to get up and do something about that. You went to your auntie's funeral who died from a heart attack. Pastor's preaching at the funeral from the guy who died from a stroke.
The same food.
And they ain't saying nothing about it because you have to be accountable for it. That means you have to do something. For example, we had a lot of church members been coming out to our run. We have like 200 to 300 people every time. And the pastors are just like, man, I love to run, but I don't know if I'm going to come out there. We are not in a position where you have a choice for that right now. You need to be leading your congregation to a healthier lifestyle because half of y'all are too huge as well. But this is where we live in, and to a point where we just got to tell the truth about that. We have to stop playing games with our health. That's the biggest issue, in my opinion.
Literally.
We can talk everything else. The biggest issue we're dealing with around the country is your health. It ain't the crime.
Right.
It ain't nothing. It is health. That's what's killing the most people. That's how many people are dying. Nobody talks about it because you have to do something about it. You got to get up and go walk. Right. You got to go tell your grandma to stop eating that. You got to tell your auntie to stop eating that. You have to do something about it. But that ain't easy. So we just going to sit around all day and talk about how Joe Biden ain't do nothing and how Trump terrible and whatever while you eating yourself to death. That's where our community's at. Black, white, whatever.
So
it don't make no sense.
Basically, Papa, he going to be laid out in the front of the church if he don't come out and run with you. Now, I would agree with that. I think it sounds like what you're saying, King, is that we have a huge lack of personal responsibility. There's a lot of pride and there's addiction. I mean, they are putting additives in the food, but it still requires us to exhibit. Well, look at that. The fruit of the spirit, self-control, right? You got to have some self-control. I need to circle back on something you said because I believe that in theory it sounds good. But how do we, I'll say it this way. You have a huge segment of men, particularly ones that share our ethnic reflection that say, King, I hear you, but I really don't believe it's my responsibility to raise all these other children out here that I did not make. I don't want to do that. It is a thankless job. You raise them, you feed them, you clothe them, and then they turn 18, and they're just so ungrateful, and it's just a bad move. What do you say to that? Because that's real.
Stop sounding like a girl, bro. Grow up. Grow up. Grow up. Grow up. And I say that because
he said it, not me,
my
y'all.
sons have to grow up in that same community that I don't want to affect. So if I ain't go try and help Lil John shoot my son, now you mad. Oh, man, we ain't got no mentors out here, blah, 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 all this stuff that they be saying all the time. But my kids got to grow up there. My kids have to grow up in this community. I cannot be a real father if I'm not trying to affect the lives of all of them around me. My sons, if they have friends, I'm gonna do my best to make sure they're doing good. I would hope they got a daddy too that would do the same thing for my son. This is not a singular thing anymore. This is a village issue. And so I was coaching baseball this season, and one of the kids got disrespectful with his mom. I raised my voice at him. I'm like, son, don't talk to your mama like that. What's wrong with you? You know, like that. His dad comes to me and says, hey man, you ain't got to do all that. You know, he got a daddy. You know, we'll handle that later and this and that. I'm like, what? Like, he on my team. And on top of that,
wait a minute, this was the father
the
reprimanding you.
The dad.
Oh no.
The
See,
dad.
this is why men are like, I'm not signing up for that.
I don't care though. It is what it is, because his granddaddy came to me and was like, listen, we don't care nothing about what he said. You did the right thing. You did the right thing. It is a thankless job, but so is a lot of other stuff. Like, nobody's gonna thank me for paying the light bill. Nobody's gonna thank me for feeding my kid.
I would.
But in reality, you don't. Being a man is a thankless job in general. So
It is.
what?
It is.
So what? Grow up and get over it. I thank myself for it, because
Okay.
if nobody ever gave me an award for anything I do for these kids, I know I got 6 that went to the military who started families. I got 2 that went to college. I got 1 that's going to the NBA. Like, they doing great. I don't care if they never thank me. I'm just happy on the inside of my own body that we did something to affect the community.
Right.
And I know where they were headed before me, some who was in juvie and all that stuff, where they were headed before me, they was going to hurt somebody else's kid. If everybody adopted the idea to try and do something, not just one person, but if all y'all got in a group and was like, all right, how about all of us try and do something? Because I get it, one of you is a lot. But
Right.
I'm sure it's 6 or 7 other guys somewhere around you. If y'all link up and click up and y'all go create some mentorship or whatever like that, then you cool. Another issue is people think that they have to have some massive program to do this stuff. You don't. It don't need to be massive. I'm trying to only affect my local community. People always like, oh, are you going to expand the S for Boys? No, it's all about Albany, Georgia. That is what it is. I believe in Albany. You can take what I'm doing and you know,
Rinse and
you can
repeat
do it on
it,
your
yeah.
own. I'm not about to spend time and become this national program that's not actually affecting the kids. No, I want to actually affect the kids where we are. I believe in Albany, Georgia. That's my hometown. That's me. And so if people stop with the whole trying to be national thing all the time,
Right.
it don't need to be national.
That's all ego,
work,
too.
yes,
That's
work
all
where
ego.
you at. Work where you are and things will grow. If you stay in your own silo, in your own clique of your hometown,
Right.
you would actually see more progress. And that's what I've been seeing since I stopped going on Fox and doing all the big podcasts and stuff. I'm back in my hometown. Now things are changing because I'm being diplomatic, talking to our local leaders, interacting with other nonprofits, doing what we can with them, and now things are actually changing. Slowly but surely, we're making progress versus fussing all the time.
April, to your point, you're not gonna like reach everybody. So like you mentioned some men that feel that way. I'm focused on the men that are aligned. You know, because I don't have time. I mean, people will come along. I believe in God's divine timing. You know, do the work. Let people see the fruits. You know, most times people are disillusioned because they don't see the fruits of it. They haven't
Right.
seen a good model. You know, but we can create those models, you know, and then they'll speak for itself because you see the fruits, the people who've come along and like, man, I want my son to be a part of that. Maybe I missed something. I misspoke. I mean, there's been plenty of times I've been wrong about stuff and then changed my mind. But that's the whole thing, man, the constant renewing of your mind. You know, like it doesn't, you know, that's what God is for. You know, God is kind of has a bigger vision that sometimes we don't see. You know, and so you pray for that brother, you know what I'm saying? I always kind of leave the door open, you know what I'm saying? We may agree or disagree, and then we come back to the table. I mean, you can imagine as being a conservative, I get a lot of people who, like, disagree with me, you know, want to call me Uncle Tom, and then they meet me and be like, you know what, you're actually a good black dude, you know what I'm saying? Because my whole thing is that, look, I just give a lot of grace. You know, God gives grace. We got to also be able to give grace and not take ourselves that serious.
Well, I will say this. I get it, and I like how you said that, Jerron, because so many times conservatives we have an image problem, right? Like, do these two look like the type that you want to, just want to beat them up and take their lunch money? No, right? They just real. They are black
try.
men, right? But so many times, they think they can try us because we're conservative. I be like, these ain't the problems that you want, okay? So, as we're gonna wrap it up here, I'll just say a few words. I think the biggest challenge is we've heard for so long that it takes a village, right? We've heard that, but the problem with at least my philosophy, and I think you guys have won me over slightly on some things, but I've always been of the opinion that I was like, I don't want the village raising my kids. I've seen the outcomes of the village. I don't want the village. Right, right. So that's the nuance. You guys said it that it is a nuance. I don't want the village raising my children. However, in that we can have some nuance and say you select the village. You choose the individuals that you want to have influence in your children's lives without abdicating the responsibility that rests on your shoulders,
Amen.
which is to be a fully present parent. You guys you've been incredibly amazing. I think what we're going to do now, we're going to open it up for questions. Right? We're going to take a few questions from we got a live audience, y'all. We got a live audience. Please, let's do some housekeeping things. Make your questions brief, right? Like don't like give a whole dissertation, right? Keep them brief, short, to the point, so that we can get as many questions in at a time, and then let us know who your question is directed toward. I don't know if we have an actual microphone for that. How are we going to facilitate that? Yeah, let's do that. I like it. Okay, so does anyone first? We don't even know if anybody even has a question. Hey, beautiful. What's your question?
My question is kind of to both of you guys. Randall, for the past well, I gotta say since I was five, I grew up in the hood. Saw my cousin killed at 5. I wore glasses. I was picked on. I was bullied, and I always wanted to escape it. Right? I've seen stabbings, beatings, all kind of things. Held at gunpoint, robbery. But I always knew that I didn't belong. And I remember, like at 5, I remember praying to God and saying, like, "Why did you bring me here?" So my life has kind of been like this mystery purpose, and I know it's to bring kids out. And so for the past 12 years, I've been on this mission to try to open a boarding school because I felt like Upward Bound and this Vernon P. Freeman man that ran Upward Bound at Stillman College in Alabama, he changed my life too because I was able to be removed from that environment, and I was there every other weekend and then summers, right? And so I've been trying to create that for kids because I'm like, if we can just take them out of these environments, then we can start the change.
Right.
And I don't get the support I've been looking for over 12 years. I stay heavily involved in politics because I'm hoping like one day in divine timing, God's timing, that He'll bring the right tribe around me to make this happen. And so, do you ever feel like you wanted to make ex boys a boarding school and ran into the similar issues? And why aren't there legislations to help me build this so that we can actually get these kids out of this environment and we can start changing the trajectory?
We did open a boarding school at one point. It was 2022 when we opened the boarding school. We started out about 8 or 9 kids, I believe. It was expensive. I'm a believer in no government funding. I stay away from grants. Now, granted, we've grown to a point now where we operate 5 days a week. I believe the boarding concept was a beautiful concept. However, I think that what we're doing now is still just as good as boarding. We have them 5 days a week, and after school up until 8 o'clock nighttime. We feed them, we send them home with toiletries, etc., and they go to school the next day and they come back to us after school. They probably at home in their neighborhoods or whatever for 2 hours. I say 2 hours because it's gonna be about 2 hours before you go to sleep. You're gonna go bathe, you're gonna watch a little TV, you're gonna go to sleep. We tire them out while they're with us also. So you ain't even thinking about things. So I had to just think about that because once I decided to shut the boarding part, I'm like, okay, let's pivot. Let's figure out how we can, better work with the kids. The after school program has just been a beautiful thing. We pick them up from school every day. Like I said, we serve them 5 days a week. We feed them. We send them home with underwear, whatever, whatever. But to me, it works just as good because we're still spending that amount of time. Because truly, the boarding only means they're going to sleep with you. And if they were going to sleep with us, I mean, I don't think it's no different from them just going home and going to sleep. Especially not. I will say you deal with abuse and things like that at home. We've had that issue before, but we deal with it. We've built a relationship with those kids to the point where they're not scared to tell us things. We've gotten kids out of those bad situations or whatever like that. We constantly ask them, is everything okay? What's going on? If mama need help with the light bill, whatever, we do what we can to support those kids. So I think we're at a place where we are affecting them just as much as we were, with the boarding school, we do still have to teach them about brushing their teeth, etc., or whatever like that. I mean, we've had kids go to the local school system, that I've talked to the superintendent about. These kids are coming to first and second grade still not potty trained. We had kids who didn't know how to brush their teeth because they hadn't been brushing their teeth. But this is where I go back to, you have to go outside and really understand what's really happening out there. People really going through these like dastardly things, and so you have to have institutions, like ours. So I started with the boarding concept, and I went and backtracked to the after school program. But I think it's doing just as well. And then maybe I think we'll grow there. Once I got out of dealing with politics, I grew a whole lot more. When I spent all the time like going to all the events and going to CPAC and this and that, just trying to interact with all the conservatives or the Democrat side, or whatever, trying to call my senators and this and that. Once I stopped dealing with them and started dealing with regular people, we started growing. We started to grow. So
Sounds
now,
like government's not the answer.
no. So our budget right now, we have a little over a $500,000 budget. That budget comes from regular people. I've had to learn how to market what it is that we do. We constantly post on social media, whatever. That budget just comes from regular people. We haven't gotten any grants.
So I'll
none of
say
that.
this.
Go ahead.
In the One Big Beautiful Bill, there is a provision that basically gives a tax credit to scholarship granting organizations. So that basically means that should make it easier for you to raise money because people can get a tax benefit from it when you're creating pipelines for school choice. And so that's one provision that's being marketed out there. It's kind of new. People got to take advantage of it. I can certainly kind of connect you with some people who are kind of expert at kind of that marketplace, because that's the other thing with education. It's changing that you can kind of individualize education with technology, and it's a lot of people who have these homeschool networks that you can maybe instead of it being boarding school, be something different. Where you have them a good amount of days, like he mentioned. But there's growing resources out there where you maybe can talk to people who you want to raise money from, and then they get a tax benefit from it, because people are looking for write-offs, especially in the kind of high net worth individuals.
Yeah, I
To charter school. I'm in the incubator program right now. So my school is set to open in 2 weeks.
Okay, awesome.
So I'm like, maybe let me just start here, and then we
Start somewhere.
get there.
I was
Start
just gonna say,
somewhere.
start where you are, because I actually went to boarding school for high school, and it is incredibly expensive.
It
And
is.
the school I attended, it still exists, but the boarding department, they closed it because they couldn't attract enough boarders, because it was just too cost prohibitive.
Yes.
So
Boarding
they're
schools.
finding other creative ways to achieve the same goal, but just finding a different pathway there. But I commend you. That is a beautiful goal to have, and it's gonna work out. It's
Yeah,
gonna work
the goal,
out.
just make sure you spend as much time with them as possible, because that's what the boarding concept is for. It's for them to spend more time in a good place than a bad place. So just figure out how we can just get them home only for 8 hours,
Just keep
just
'em busy.
to go to sleep, and the rest of the day they with us. So
That's good. What's your question? Hi, Zimmy.
Good afternoon. So, as someone who is very deeply involved in the sanctity of life issue in the state of Georgia and defending the personhood of all innocent human life, my question is, how would you approach the issue of encouraging women and men to keep their preborn child while addressing the societal issues that you have discussed today?
Great question. Basically, Zemi wants to know, how can we encourage women and men to protect the lives of our preborn neighbors in the womb, while also addressing a lot of these social and cultural issues. So, who wants to tackle that?
Well, I can talk from personal experience. I've had a woman that I had an abortion, that I dated when I was 25 years old, and the experience sent me in a huge depression. Like I went into a big depression, and honestly it's where God kind of helped me rebound and change my life. But I also have three older sisters, and all of them traumatically experience abortions, and so that's what I talk about with people when I meet them. And for years, when I worked on Capitol Hill, I represented the life issue, and that's how I got to meet Dean Nelson and kind of got into the DLI movement. But I mean, it also goes back to, like, what we were talking about before, just giving people alternatives because some people don't even understand that there's alternative or help. If you choose to have a child, they think that they don't have any choice. And the sad part of it is so ingrained in the culture from like their parents and their grandparents, and a huge push to say like don't have the kid, and versus kind of like we can help you, and so I think that it just goes to a point where we got to get more in the community to build trust so that people can look at our movement as someone that trusts. But like the feminist movement has been really tough on black women, and I've dealt with it personally because there's this whole view of like a woman's right to choose versus kind of the
Choose the
sanctity of
mother.
life. Yeah, and that's the whole thing. It's just like the state can't make me carry a baby, and it's like my womb and stuff like that. And that's a complex issue that like we're really up against. But again, I think that when you're dealing with the community, it's teaching them something different because like people don't learn this stuff. Like the Marxism and everything, like this is people are taught, but they don't get taught the alternative. They don't learn the X's and O's of like capitalism or why it works or why it's more sustainable. Because we've gotten lazy with that. We've let the school system, who have all these Marxist ideas, raise our children.
Disciple us.
And TV raise our children. And so it's just going to take a lot of us kind of getting out in the community and educating people on like there's a different way of doing things that's going to kind of lead to more fruit in your future.
Yep, opportunity and going outside.
He's always talking about going
I keep I
outside.
keep I keep saying going outside because what the other side is doing is they outside. You know who knocking on doors and leaving door hangers and all that about
They
abortions and
outside.
stuff? They outside. You know who not outside? The
We
pro
not
lifers. We
outside.
not outside. And so if they ain't heard nothing
Let me,
else,
let me just say this: they're outside during the election year, and so
yes,
I can
yes,
tell you this because even working for Donald Trump, non-election year, I went into communities all across the country, in the cities, and they're not used to having a conversation about what's the art of the possible because people don't show up until the elections around.
yep,
Republicans don't show up at all during the election season, and the Democrats show up. But they're showing up is to just tell them to vote during the election season. So it's ample opportunity for us to create relationships. So by that time,
got to.
the political season comes,
They be like, "Oh, I
they see
remember
something
you,"
different. Yeah,
because they've seen you because
You
we was
gotta.
outside.
correct.
Yep.
Right. All
Yep,
right.
you gotta show them something opposite, and again, that's gonna come with going outside and spending time with people. And on top of that, again, it's gonna take a long time. The stuff again we're looking for is not gonna be overnight. We're not gonna convince them to stop overnight. It's gonna be
Right.
5 to 10 years, 15 years, or whatever to truly see that percentage start to drop. But that's gonna come with them learning, getting more opportunities to be able to take care of their kids, and on top of that, us spending time with them, letting them know and educating them. Hey, there are other options than to just killing your kid. There's other things that you could do, to make this happen. So again, if truly, if we want to see that stuff happen, we just got to spend the time doing it. Spend as much time as they are indoctrinating them. We got to spend as much time doing the opposite.
Right.
So,
Can I say something just on piggyback? Because I want you to really understand this too. Because like, I really love the fact that you're laser focused on Albany. Because the danger that we run into also is this helicoptering in and then leaving. You know what I mean? And nothing burns someone more than that. So it's being intentional from the get go that you're in it for the long run and willing to do the work.
Right. We got to get outside. What's your question?
Speaking of outside, I'm outside, so I am a mentor and I'm a warrior for the unborn. And what you was mentioning earlier, it hit me like a brick wall. I have been awakened to what I call high level ignorance, ignorance that is out of this world, and that is no shade. Meaning, um, young women come into my life, and for me to mentor them, and me trying to convince them not to take the lives of their baby. But when I met with having difficulties even just communicating with this young mom because her English is so broken, where it is literally was just so difficult for her to even have a conversation with me. Or this same mom, asking me, I don't have anything to eat. I'm like, okay, so I pull up with groceries
To
with
it.
the hands and feet of Jesus. And what I have learned though is that the word of God talks about the weapons of our warfare
It's
are not
spiritual.
carnal.
It's
And
spiritual
so,
battle.
yes, what you do is so amazing. But the question I have for you, are you praying? Are you warring? Because Paul talks about we do have to deal with the flesh. We do need these programs. We do need what you are doing. But I can speak as a witness. What is needed is prayer because the reason why these high level out of these world ignorant people is because we're dealing with generational curses and strongholds and familiar spirits. So it's a question as well as wanting to encourage you to have a battle plan to deal with the flesh and to deal with the spirit. Say, hey, you
I'm gonna
have
take this
such a
one.
prominent voice within your community and you have such an amazing connection with the body of Christ, with the church, from your family. Hey, this group of people over here, they're dealing with a level of ignorance that you've been eloquently explained and have people warned that you know are prayer warriors
Okay,
standing in
I
the
gotta.
gap
They're
for
giving me the
as well.
signal.
So that's my question. Are you praying as well?
So
Because prayer changes things.
okay, so what I was gonna say is I think we have to have a multifaceted approach. The purpose of the church is theological and spiritual. What it sounds like what he is doing is more social and cultural, and then it sounds like what this gentleman Jerron is over here, he is very much involved in the political. And so all of us have a gift, a talent, or ability, and we all need to do our part. I would send a clarion call to the faith leaders in the room to we need to get outside, right? Because it's one thing for him to be outside and for him to be outside, but if the people of God are not outside and we're expecting people to come in the church is for believers. We go out there, make disciples, and then bring them in. So yes, it's going to require prayer. It is going to require the proclamation of the gospel, but we got to get outside. That was a whole word. Look at you, King. You guys, it's been amazing. I have to wrap it up. Thank you guys for the live show. Thank you to my guests, King Randall, Jerron Smith. You guys, I am so grateful, but I'm curious to know, what do you guys think? Leave me your comments down below. I'm sorry I didn't get to engage in the chat, but until next time, you guys, stand firm, stay bold, and above all else, stay unshakable. Grace and peace.